Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Andrew Turner, founder and host of the G&C Sessions podcast. And today we have Mr. Sam Beni. Hi, Sam. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for joining us on a bright sunny morning. Actually, it's quite good today down here on the south coast. Where are you joining from today?
Central London.
Oh, the big smoke.
The big smoke. Indeed. Well, although today, as you mentioned, is quite a nice day.
So, I know that we spoke the other day, and I know that it was an interesting kind of catch up, and because I know there's been a few you could say evolutions in your journey so far, and we kind of were shooting the breeze, so to speak, and then you talked about some of the stuff that you were now working on and now developing, and I know it's been kind of like an extension of what you'd done before. So I was really interested in getting you on the show because I think there's some really powerful kind of triggers it made in my brain about the kind of things that you said to me that I thought that we should get out into the wider ecosystem of some of the things that you've experienced and some of your I think one of your like your reflections on what you saw and what you did and what the impact it had for you, and then obviously how you developed. So, I mean, for people that don't know, Sam Beni yet, the man, the legend, maybe you could do a little bit of a quick intro and just help people understand a bit about what gets you up in the morning, I suppose, so to speak.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me today here, and thank you for listening, watching wherever you are, and thank you for your time. Of course, a bit of background about myself: 5 times founder. People call it like serial entrepreneur, but I really dislike the word serial entrepreneur. Sounds like serial killer. I might have killed a few companies here and there, but hey, few were successful. So that's why I call myself like a ex-founder or so forth. In terms of like what I'm really interested in, I'm a tech futurist and optimist. I genuinely believe that technology has got the power to be able to improve our lives and ultimately build a better world. And previously, I've coined the term complex AI and did a TEDx talk on that. I speak around the world around the specific areas of complex AI. I'm also advisor and net to few very innovative companies, innovative startups. But also lately, I have put my founder hat back on again and founded a new venture, which is very, very exciting. It's a super advanced complex AI system that we reimagine how networking is done virtually.
Okay, cool. So yeah, there was a lot of info in that one. So and you actually so you said you set up a company with a new term. I mean, people are trying to get their head around what AI is in the first place, and then you say you've got another complex AI, which I presume means it's more complicated. I mean, is there a layman's version of that, or I mean, it means you
Yes,
don't have to have a PhD to understand it?
more than happy to explain it. And I mean, plug in a shameless plug. Ultimately, you can have a look on the TEDx talk to explain it a bit further. But I can explain it easily. So ultimately, the initial idea was that like when we have this idea of like general AI, whereas AI actually achieves human level intelligence, the narrow AI, whereas these
Hmm.
AI systems that we've got specifically deployed in a specific
So
area.
what they call
Correct.
the
So I mean,
sentient moment, is it? As they
yeah,
call
so
that.
we have like ultimately in academia, we've got like narrow AI, general AI, and super AI. So as is narrow AI, these are like narrow level intelligence. For example, Alexa can do certain things; it cannot be lifted and shifted elsewhere to be able to deploy. Whereas we've got then general AI, whereas we have achieved a high level of human intelligence, it can actually be deployed in lots of different areas, similar to human being. Whereas we thought initially, like in order to be able to get to general AI, we have to look into the complex world, right? The society we live in currently uh, is a complex world. The world is a complex world. And what complex means is
Mm.
that when you have many independent agents, so will, like many independent um, individuals that can make their own autonomous decisions in an environment, right? Whereas historically, AI wasn't really good at that environment. So we thought ultimately to be able to deploy machine learning and having multiple objectives at the same time for this machine learning algorithm in an environment that is very complex. So you've got multiple, more than tons of ultimately agents or so well individuals or characters or anything that is in a complex
Or
world.
no, like nodes. It's like nodes in a.
Oh,
It's like nodes
exactly.
in a network, isn't it? It's like nodes.
Spot on,
Yeah,
right? Or
yeah.
nodes in a network. A network is a complex environment. For example, internet is a complex environment.
Mm,
To be able to deploy that,
mm.
we need to move from a narrow AI to a complex AI, then to general AI. So the complex AI is the bridge between narrow AI to general AI.
Ah, okay. So this thing. I suppose the thing is, I suppose there's this confusion about. So you've got generative AI.
Correct.
So where does that sit? Is that still narrow? Would you say, or is that more? Is it kind of is jet the generative AI we're seeing now and experiencing like a whirlwind or a tsunami in the last 9 to 12 months? Where do you place that on the continuum then?
Of course. So generative AI, it really depends on a specific, model that we're talking about. So, for example, when it comes to Midjourney, which is a generative AI for a specific image generation, it's a narrow AI algorithm because you
Mid
cannot
journey, yeah.
just shift it and put it elsewhere and to be able to kind of like move forward. But whereas when it comes to transformer models, specifically on LLMs, like late stage LLMs, appropriately, you could theoretically to be able to deploy them elsewhere. So the water is getting a bit murky here. So I would say like majority of the late stage LLMs are complex AI.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, because I was talking to somebody the other day, because I'm working with a company, a kind of AI data management company in Silicon Valley. Um, and you talk about the big tech titans, as they call them. Yeah, I don't know if Titan's the right word, but oligarchies kind of thing. The tech, the four horsemen of the apocalypse, as Scott Galloway calls them, from his book The Four. But obviously there's been different treatments. With the Microsoft, partnering with OpenAI or putting a lot of money into OpenAI, and then obviously you've got people like Meta, who've got kind of Llama. Llama 2's just been released.
Absolutely,
So that's the
that's right.
kind of I find it funny actually. I find it funny that so I was on a call actually, and we were talking about llama. So I changed my background to be a llama, like having a llama over my shoulder, and everybody burst out laughing on the call. And then I actually said, and then I said, well, what's llama 3? So then I put 3 llamas behind me. It's like I don't know where they come up with uh,
These
these fr- these
acronyms.
these
These are
names. I don't know where they come. You
yeah.
just is it just a developer? The developer likes llamas or something like that. So they say, oh, let's call it llama. So
Yeah, I think it's a good coincidence there because the acronym appropriately, but also llama is quite interesting because it has come from a dead zone. Basically, like llama was dead and kind of came back to life appropriately with llama too. So it's an interesting development. I mean, when it comes to generative AI, we've seen the ecosystem exploded for the past 2 years, and appropriately every week there is
mm.
a new solution out there. So it's not very easy to keep on top of like the development, specifically around generative AI. But it's an exciting time because this is just showcases the exponentiality of technology, right? I mean, I usually talk about the 2020s as of like we're in 2023 is a decade of
Mm.
convergence, right? So we've got multiple technologies appropriately,
All right, okay.
uh, and from AI to quantum
So they're not
to
they're not diverging, they're converging. Yeah.
spot on. Whereas if you look into 2010s, we had the specific key areas that been independently being developed, right? Whereas right now we are converging
Mm.
those technologies together to be able to create new use cases. So, for example, last year we've been talking about metaverse quite a lot, but metaverse is not really a technology per se. It's a use case of multiple technologies being converged together. So, in this case, it would be blockchain, AI,
Right.
virtual environments to be able to converge in order to be able to create a use case, which is a metaverse. And we see that more and more often, right? So we've got, for example, quantum machine learning, which is AI plus quantum computers, appropriately. And this is a decade of convergence. We see like we would, I mean, the amount of technology
Mm.
we see for the next 7 years would equal the last 100 years. So buckle up, folks. It's going to be an interesting decade.
So, sorry, say that phrase again. What you said, what this decade is going to be a roll up of the last 100 years.
I would say the next
Wow.
decade we would see more innovations than the last 100 years combined. Yeah, definitely buckle up for an interesting ride.
How do that's a big statement.
I
Why do you think that?
Well, of course, there are multiple. It's a multifaceted area for this, right? Really, but it's based on barrier to entry. So, for example, let's say that you're graduating from high school, right? As a high schooler, you have access to the most advanced generative AI algorithms out there. So you can just literally go on GPT-4 and say like, hey, what's the best idea to be able to combine
Or
such a
five or whatever.
technology,
Yeah.
or five
Yeah.
or whichever, yeah, combine
Mm.
this technology with the other technology, and then suddenly, because of like having large language models access to all of our knowledge in humanity, it can support you to come up with innovative idea and a gap, and suddenly over a weekend you can build a company, prove that the gap exists, build an MVP, and the next week you get a small amount of funding, and then you can build a company. So that's how innovations are usually done in this day and age. And there would be an explosion of entrepreneurship for the next decade because of the barrier to entry has been removed. And in this case, you've
Right.
got access to cloud technologies, AWS. You literally can over a weekend build a new tech company. And so for that reason,
Mm.
because of also knowledge was one of the key barriers, right? We all are knowledge workers, right? Because we go through university, we go through do
Mm.
all of our PhD and so on to be able to gather knowledge and utilize it. But also the knowledge barrier has been removed by having access to LLMs, whereas you can ask any questions and get the answers immediately
Mm.
and learn about anything that you want. So the next decade is going to be a very interesting decade.
Yeah, that's you spot on there actually, because it's a bit like having a well, you call it an assistant, aren't they? But the combined intelligence or knowledge of that LLM is so large. Um, yeah, wow, scary times. Oh no, scary. No, so scary.
Well,
Positive, amazing times.
I wouldn't say it's scary.
Yeah.
Obviously,
I was playing with Hugging Face the other day. Actually, I
yeah.
think some of these companies have got cool names. Hugging Face. I mean, it's like how could when I started in the technology industry, well, how could I actually have a? It's like that emoji, that kind of emoji of Hugging Face. Having a tech company called Hugging Face, it's quite amusing. But it was literally to your point. I was, I logged into it. I'd been authenticated. I was in it within 5 minutes, and then browsing the models they've got. It's quite incredible. So
Absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
it's very, very. Yeah, you're right. It's about barriers to entry, and yeah, barriers to entry and knowledge. Times those two together, exponential. Yeah, and yeah, no. So I mean, one of the things also, I suppose, thank you for explaining a bit more about that complex AI piece, because I think there's a lot of kind of what I call buzzwords, isn't there? Like there's all these. If you're not involved in the tech industry, or you kind of on, the kind of, are you in a business role? Um, it's this jargon that has always, to my mind, hampered, technology adoption. It's still, there's still a faction of people who like creating new phrases, and then it's all mystical and it's all but it's actually the fundamentals of computer science have not changed. It's just the way they've packaged it and the way they're communicating it. So, so
I think it's
one of the things I know we talked about. Yeah.
Please, Andrew. Apologies.
No, so go on. So go on.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think in any sector, you've got set of acronyms that that sector ultimately agree upon, and to some extent, you're right. That's another barrier to entry for other individuals who are interested to get in. I mean, historically, for example, you can look into finance. If you look into finance and the finance world and investment banking, they've got unlimited number of
Mm.
acronyms and make it super complicated. But when you get into it, are just like very extremely simple. So the key question is that is it really necessary to be able to create random acronyms? We shall see.
Yeah, there is a bit. There is a bit of like ETFs and there's all these kind of these TLAs and FLAs, isn't there? That
Yeah.
they like to throw around in those very expensive bars, wherever they are in the world. Um, yeah. So yeah, I mean, but one of the things I wanted to talk about as well was I know that you um, have been through different kind of stages, but I know that one of the things that struck me really strongly with when we spoke was about because I mean, I suppose you weren't originally born, or were you born in the UK, or did your parents come from another
Yeah.
country, or how
I
did how
can.
did that?
Yeah. Thank you for being politically correct here, Andrew. Well, I can explain that. Ultimately, I came to UK when I was 17. I came to UK as an asylum seeker,
Okay.
actually. And not many people knew, even like
Oh
few of
wow.
my co-founders didn't know until I actually got my British citizenship last year. And so I came to UK when I was 17 as an asylum seeker, and I was an asylum seeker for around 4 years. So what that means is that ultimately I couldn't open a bank account, couldn't work or study. So that's kind of like that experience pushed me to be an entrepreneur. And so I didn't become an entrepreneur out of choice. I became an entrepreneur out of any other kind of. I didn't have any other choice. So it's an interesting journey. I have to say, I
So
was
just
extremely
just a quick
lucky.
question. Just quick question.
Yeah,
Just a quick question. So you're saying you land you land in the UK. You get through border control. Yeah, seeking asylum.
correct.
And then what you're saying, because you've got that background, you can't have a bank account. That's what you're saying.
Correct. I mean, I'm not sure what has happened for the past decade, but in my time, appropriately as an asylum seeker, you're not allowed to have a bank account. They're just banks that don't open bank account for you. Yeah, you're kind of like in
And for
a
what reason?
well,
What's
because
the reason they say that?
you're
Why do they
you're
say that?
because you're legally in a gray zone in the country, right? In any point, the country can remove you from the country appropriately. They don't want to be associated with such person because you don't know what would happen to them
Oh,
ultimately.
because you're
So they
trying to
would
secure, you're trying to secure citizenship, but you don't potentially have
not
that
citizenship,
completed,
but
so
refugee
they
status,
treat.
right? So ultimately
Mm,
government has got around 6 months to answer to a specific case, whether it decline or accept the asylum case, right? And in that case, if they are declined,
right.
ultimately go through multiple legal barriers, but then they would be removed from the country to their original destination, so whichever country that they came from.
So
Um,
you're depo- you repatriated to the. Yeah. Okay.
Correct. And if they believe that your asylum case is bogus, is not true. But if you're accepted, then you would be
Mm,
given a refugee status. That then you can open a bank account. Then you can actually go work or study or other things. So for me, for some reason, my case was kind of missing for a couple of years, and so that was a quite an interesting experience.
wow. And which country were you coming from?
Of course, I was born in Iran, so I came from Iran, and yeah, for various reasons, unfortunately, I had to flee, and I came to UK as a asylum seeker. But yeah, I'm unfortunate enough to be lucky, quite frankly, with you, Andrew. And the reason is because, let's be honest, if we want to take on an average of individuals, I shouldn't be here talking about the futuristic kind of technologies and entrepreneurship with you on this session, I should be probably tonight when you go to a kebab shop serving you kebab, as on average, quite frankly. But the reason that I'm here is because I was extremely lucky to be able to put into a network of individuals, entrepreneurs themselves, as that has created this mindset and this ultimately influence on me to be able to be entrepreneur, and here I am today. But not many people have got that chance, quite frankly.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, this is, I suppose, something I wanted to, have the opportunity to talk to you about, because I think it's, I mean, obviously, I haven't experienced that because I've been through, I was born here. I'm kind of like Irish. There's an Irish tree and there's an English tree, or people call it a Viking tree, actually. So I'm supposed to be like this, part Viking, part Irish. But anyway, yeah. So I suppose there's obviously, you see a lot of information about this, but you don't really experience it personally. So um, it's quite remarkable. I suppose it's positive in the sense that the UK is actually opens its doors to help people at least consider their case. But it also sounds like it's quite a protracted process, and not guaranteed.
Well, I'm not at all putting UK's ultimately motives in question at all in any shape or scenario. Actually, I'm very grateful, quite frankly, to have the opportunity. But it really depends
Mm.
on the policies, right? I mean, certain policies that exist,
Mm.
it's positive, it's negative. It's, you can it's never black and white. There is a lot of kind of like different shades in between,
No,
and
grey area. Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
and it's all about kind of like set objectives appropriately. What we want to achieve as a society, and what are the goals
Mm.
appropriately. Like certain countries across the globe have set their objectives very clearly, and they're either on the extreme other side or the other side. So, for example, you can compare a Middle Eastern country to, for example, Sweden. They're quite different.
Mm.
And so it really depends on, as a society, what we decide to go forward with.
Mm. Mm. So you mentioned that I mean, obviously it's kind of like when you join and you've got those kind of constraints, you've got that kind of forcing function of getting creative, you could say, which usually entrepreneurs have to be. You have to think on your feet. So what you mentioned this thing about, I suppose it's the piece around, you're the average of the five people you spend the most time with. That classic quote. Um, but how did you get involved in that entrepreneurship, and what was that? What was that experience, and how did that develop?
Of course. Well, as I mentioned, like in this case, it was pure luck. And the reason was that because I was fortunate enough to know an individual who really wanted to start a new company and asked me and knew my situation and said like, hey, Sam, I know your situation. Would you like to co-found this company with me? I would be the custodian of your shares and we kind of like go forward with it. I was like, dude, I don't have any other choice. Let's just do this, right? So I moved to another city
Oh,
to be able
right.
to
Okay.
start my first company, and it worked well. We suddenly hired multiple developers, designers, and so on. It was like pre-AWS era, really. So we were providing web infrastructure appropriately to any SMEs. And we got into renewable energy out of nowhere from one of our projects. And it was a kind of a big deal. We were young entrepreneurs. And this was like, by the way, not 2023 as we've got this green revolution. We're talking about a time that only the big energy companies were in renewable energy. So we've been squeezed slowly out of the market. I ended up, making a choice: either keep the company alive or move into my office for a few months, sleep on the couch, the classic entrepreneurial journey. And that few months turned into 3 years. So that was
Wow.
quite a fun to sleep on the, on the couch of my office for 3 years. And but it was
Well,
good.
you
I mean,
slept in the office for 3 years.
yes, but you know, you can see it from a bright side. The bright side was that, you know, I had to go to gym to take a shower, so I had to go do a quick kind of like session in a gym. So I got fit. I got fit. You know, you can see it from a bright side. But yeah, that was a quite an interesting journey.
Where was that? Where was that then? Where was that in the UK then? Which
Yeah. So
city were you
that
working?
at
Were
the
you
time
in
of
London or somewhere else?
no, no, at the time we were in Birmingham.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had Tom Allen on, who's I don't know if you know him. He's the founder of the AI Journal. He's quite a character,
I know Tom. Yeah.
and we were having a laugh about Tom, yeah. So we were having a laugh at we went to Ascot together a few weeks ago for the races, and the on the podcast episode I had him on a few months ago, and we were laughing about what do you call Birmingham in relation to Silicon? You know, like you got Silicon Roundabout in London, you've got Silicon, Silicon Valley, you've got obviously Silicon Prairie, you've got Silicon Alley, and then we obviously got the Bull Ring in Birmingham. So we do call it Silicon Bull or Silicon Ring. So this kind of discussion we were having. I don't know if you got
That's
any. What would you vote for, or something different?
Well, I think there is an organization already in Birmingham called Silicon Canal, as far as I'm aware. And
Or Silicon Canal?
yes, yes, and also there is another organization that I think changed their name recently from Birmingham Tech to West Midland Tech, WM Tech, and is actually the CEO and founder of it is ex-colleague of mine, Yanis. So yeah, shout out to Yanis for doing good work in Birmingham.
All right, okay. Birmingham Power. I mean, but Birmingham is the second largest city in the UK, isn't it? I think
Correct,
it's
it is.
number two. Is that right?
It's
Behind
number two.
London.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. And it's growing very fast.
So, I mean, one of the things that is it? Yeah, I say since I've been there. I used to work there actually a while ago with British Steel many years ago. I used to have to drive down from Yorkshire to Birmingham. Sit in traffic jams all the time. That you do.
Yeah. Another shout out
The
to Andy Street, who is the mayor of West Midlands. So yeah.
yeah, you dropping all you do nice name dropping in the office here. It's quite impressive.
Yeah, because you never know. Maybe they're listening. So shout out to them.
And if not, why not?
Exactly.
You heard it here first on the G&T sessions with Sam Beni.
Awesome.
We've been doing a breakfast, like the breakfast show. It's early morning. It's like the breakfast show with Sam and Andrew.
Yes, indeed, it is a breakfast show, isn't it?
So one of the things I was going to say was the other thing that I know that we touched on when we spoke was quite a big. I think it sounded like quite a big experience that you had, and it really, I suppose, when you're talking about financial services, it also tapped you into the kind of investment community.
Yeah.
Because I know that some of the stuff I know you'll talk about a little bit detail a bit later is about venture capitalists. What's a venture capitalist? Are you a venture capitalist? Do you want to be a venture capitalist? And one of the things that I was quite interested in is you sharing the journey that you experienced when you were with Tech Nation, because I think that was obviously I've had a few guests on. Jackie was one of the founding, I won't say founding fathers, founding mothers of the from Flying Binary. She's very active in that kind of space, and obviously there was there's Rush Shaw. There's quite a few people who were like kind of there at the beginning, many years ago, and then obviously it formed into. I think it was with Gerard. Was it Gerard running it? Tech Nation.
Yeah, Gerard was the CEO of Tech Nation. Tech Nation 1.0, that is. Yeah. I mean, Tech Nation is being revived at the moment. I call it Tech Nation 2.0.
Well, you're saying that's this new version that's coming up?
Correct, yes.
Or the new version that's evolving to now?
Yeah.
So what was your experience at Tech Nation 1.0 then? What
It was
did you get out of
incredible.
that
I mean,
experience?
it was certainly incredible, and the reason is because I was scaling my AI company mid-pandemic, and for various reasons. I mean, I got bold in mid-pandemic because it was very stressful to scale a company, manage a company appropriately mid-pandemic, and but we were quite fortunate enough that we were working on a very specific, advanced emerging technologies. But yeah, I have exited that company as a founder mid-pandemic, and I was fortunate enough. I worked previously in some capacities before I knew about TechNation, before it was like Tech City UK, and so there was an opportunity, and I took it on to get into
Mm.
TechNation, specifically support them on their applied AI efforts to be able to expand that network, which was great fun. Being involved with UK government, appropriately Office for AI, and so on, to be able to expand the applied AI ecosystem across UK. And then I took on innovation function. So I built the innovation function appropriately within TechNation, which included, ultimately supporting all the accelerators from pre-seed to IPO, as well as investment. So I was also responsible for the investments, the coaching, the consulting, thought leadership, and so on. It was amazing. I mean, TechNation been an amazing force for good in the UK, and the numbers really showcase it, right?
Mm.
So if you look into before Tech City UK was formed, UK had around 7 unicorns, the companies that valued over $1 billion. When TechNation 1.0 closed its doors, we had over 145 of them, and only 3 countries in the
Wow.
world, by the way, have over 100 unicorns: is US, China, and UK. UK is a tiny island with like 67 million population, right? You cannot compare it with like US and China with like billion, population. But yet we are actually competing in that section of like having so many unicorns appropriately based here in this island. And I think TechNation had a massive play at that, right? Because you can see 1/3 of all those unicorns graduated from TechNation accelerators.
Yeah, I was just thinking. I was just thinking of a funny analogy. There was, the film 300. With the Trojans. It's a bit like like when they fight that big army. It's like so you got like I have to use Mid Journey to create like unicorns that look like Trojans. With armor on. It's a bit like that. Because sounds like the UK. To your point. I mean, that the statistics are the facts are the facts. That's a pretty impressive output considering the population size. But I suppose it also is it a combination of if you look at those unicorns, were they founded by people who were UK nationals, or was it actually by people who had migrated to the UK and because the UK was attractive? I mean, I suppose that's an interesting stat based on your journey as well.
Yeah, I wish I had that number. I don't have the number, but I read it somewhere that usually entrepreneurs, 70% of them are immigrants, right? And there is a specific reason for that. Is because, as an immigrant, you get to a new environment, you have to be creative and figuring out how things
Mm,
work out, and you find a gap and you want to fill it.
mm,
Yeah, I mean, if that number is true, it's a quite an interesting number. But when it comes from TechNation, TechNation also provided the TechNation visa, which is the global talent visa, which is supporting the global talent to be able to come into
mm.
UK and ultimately, build businesses, get into academia or venture capitalist environment, as long as they actually a thought leader or they've got a great background in technology to be able to support the economy in the UK. So that was a quite a interesting marriage between supporting individuals across the globe to come into UK, as well as running other side of TechNation, which is supporting these entrepreneurs appropriately scale their businesses.
Yeah, I was sorry. I was just a funny thought came in my head when you said about the global talent passport. It was like I just started thinking about that TV program with David Williams and Simon Cowell. Britain's Got Talent, and where they have the golden buzzer. Like they press the golden buzzer. So I think it's called the golden buzzer. So I suppose it's analogous to that, isn't it? You find somebody who's talented, and then you want to get them, you want to help them to progress. I don't know if you know this. You probably know this actually. One of the hashtags we use for this show is G&T, growth and technology. Yeah,
That's right.
and then the other two is gifted and talented.
Here we go.
So there you go. It's perfect. I should get a golden buzzer from David
Indeed,
Williams or
indeed.
get Simon Cowell on the show.
Yes. But yeah, it
Never
was
say never.
unfortunate. Yeah, never, indeed. But it was unfortunate what has happened to TechNation 1.0, given that we've lost our key funding to Barclays Bank. But ultimately, TechNation brand was bought out by Founders Forum, and now they are reviving TechNation 2.0. So it's an exciting time.
Oh, they really? Oh, yeah. Because I think the guy is it Brent,
Brent, indeed,
the
yeah,
the
Brent Hogman,
MrLastMinute.com.
indeed.
Brent
You know
Hoban's.
why what I
He's
call
bought.
that team? I call them last minute mafia. It's because like just look at that early team. They are like literally the analogous to PayPal mafia in the US, right? Just look at those people who were in
Mm.
early 2000 in that team, and you can see them everywhere across the UK tech.
Well, I mean, I suppose that's the thing is that as you know, with your with the kind of Peter Thiel, Elon kind of analogy for PayPal guys, yeah.
That's
And I
right.
think Reid Hoffman was there. I
Reid
think
Hoffman, yes, Reid
Was Reid
Hoffman as
Hoffman there
well.
as well?
Yep, yep.
Yeah, who obviously founded LinkedIn. So yeah, I mean, I suppose that's the thing is that shared experience of them all working together. And obviously, it sounds like I don't know the last minute mafia. I know obviously I know Brent and I know about that phenomenon when they did that, which is very early. But so your observation is that there's kind of like a core group of people who kind of like splintered out
Expanding
and started new ventures.
Indeed, yeah, yeah. I mean, because
Okay.
if you look into PayPal, I mean, YouTube, lots of other kind of like amazing tech have born out of that kind of like venture appropriately. But it's quite similar when it comes to if you look into Last Minute and the success of lastminute.com appropriately, and those early teams are across the UK tech appropriately built new startups, scaled them, sold them, and so on. And as you mentioned, like Brent went and built this founders forum group, as is a great force for good in the UK to be able to provide a good
Mm.
ultimately a platform for some entrepreneurs get funding appropriately and so on. So yeah, I mean, what I mean by mafia is not per se a nefarious mafia, but ultimately a small group of people that created a network.
Yeah, no, exactly, and that, yeah, had a shared experience and then learned something that was actually then useful for them to, do something themselves or create other um, I wasn't going to say mafiosa groups or other families, but it's like it's a bit like create other kind of huddles, yeah, that become then value generating. Um, so yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I'm glad actually that because I know there was a big debate on LinkedIn about this about the negative sentiment um, about that transition from the Tech Nation to Barclays and why did it happen? I mean, did you have any perspective on that? Because I seem to. I mean, I know that people were actually tagging Rishi Sunak on it. I mean, it was that big as a.
Yes, I mean,
And
I
I
posted.
got involved in I got involved in some of the commentary on it as well uh, with Phil from Boardwave because I just couldn't understand it. Just it seemed really perplexing move. Really, I didn't really understand it.
Well, I posted about it when we learned that unfortunately we had to close shop, and I think my post on LinkedIn got like 250,000 views, something like that, and so lots of people
Wow.
got involved. Yeah. It
I
was
mean, it's
actually
really
like,
positive then that because Brent has brought the.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the good thing is that Technation is being revived to some extent. Some of the key programs
Mm,
are being reconsidered to come back again under Founders Forum leadership. And so these are really positive notes specifically for UK tech. And ultimately, Barclays team are doing their best as well. Quite frankly, it's not about you know this organization versus the other organization. Um, I mean, as an organization, we lost
Mm.
our funding. They won it, and they are deploying that funding to be able to create more programs across the ecosystem to be able to support entrepreneurs. So whether is this win lose
Mm.
situation for the UK tech, I don't know. I can't really comment on that. But I would say, as a founder, you get more options.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, I was with a session. I went to a session actually with because I went to London Tech Week, a few months ago, and there was a session with Barclays Rise. So they were talking about what they've been doing to grow things out. I think because Barclays Rise is kind of like there's like a hub in London, and I think they've developed a hub. So I don't know where else it's. There's one in definitely in India. I think they've been developing. I think.
So the Barclays, as far as I know, I'm not very well familiar with their models, but there's Barclays Rise and there's Barclays Eagle Lab, and they've got Barclays, I think, investment area for startups and so on. I mean, it's a large bank, right? So they've got a lot of sub areas.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I mean, that sounds like a well, firstly, congratulations for exiting a business, or I don't know if exiting means selling it or handing it over or something, but you don't share that. It's obviously, during a pandemic, because obviously doing practically anything during a pandemic is pretty challenging. Um, but then obviously getting the opportunity to get involved in something as legendary as Tech Nation, and then also setting up an innovation function, that must have been really a real roller coaster ride. And obviously, it then gives you access to, I suppose, lots of people in. Well, actually, helping UK government understand more about the opportunity with technology, because obviously a lot of people are, not everybody's as au fait with it, not everybody's been deep in it. But what I find incredible, when I embarked on the kind of getting involved in the tech industry a few decades ago, it wasn't sexy. It wasn't the thing to be involved in. So I find it incredible now how magnetic it is. Um, and even to that point, my youngest son, who's just turned 18, is apparently just in the process of being offered an apprenticeship in a technology company. Um, and they'll help him through his education, his university, and he did that kind of proactively by himself. He's a gamer, but it just shows how the technology industry has had an impact on the young people of today, and they want to get involved in it. Their career choices are, more than what I had, as probably one more than what you had, and yet they seem to be going more into technology, and it seems to be, I suppose they're surrounded by it. They grew up with an iPad, or they grew up with an iPhone, which I suppose is part of the. This is not an Apple advert, by the way. Obviously, could have grown up with an Android phone. They could have grown up with a Samsung Tab, um, but the I suppose that's the influence you see with the younger generations, don't you?
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think you touched on very important points there. Firstly, absolutely. So when it comes to policy making and government, we see the difference now. We see that the growth of ultimately technology is one of the key areas that they're looking into. I had the opportunity a few months ago to give a speech about future of technologies in UK Parliament, and there were many MPs and lords and ministers in the audience. And the questions I got were quite surprising, right? As like one of the lords, for example, started talking about kind of singularity, and it's quite interesting when you look into a
Oh, really?
yeah, when you look into a historic institution such as like House of Commons and House of Lords, and then you're talking about kind of like singularity
Mm.
and the kind of like emergence of super AI in that environment is quite interesting. So we see that is more and more coming into kind of like policies appropriately. I mean, it's been long enough to look into kind of like how we can catch up with technologies appropriately when it comes to policy making. But as well as you mentioned, like, choice. When it comes to technology overall, like when we talk about AI, these are like horizontal layered kind of like movers and shakers appropriately in the society. So we cannot escape technology or AI, to be honest, in 2023 as a society, as an individual, unless you want to go to a remote island and cut off internet appropriately. So you cannot escape it. That's not a bad thing, quite frankly, as long as you've got the appropriate guardrails. These technologies are there to be able to supercharge our intellects, supercharge our kind of like freedom of choice appropriately if we do it right. Though, I mean, I have my own opinions. I think we are in a crossroad, Andrew, as a society, either to choose when it comes to advancement of artificial intelligence, especially advanced artificial intelligence, to centralize them, right? Whereas we see that right now with these large language models, we've got six of them that cost a lot of money to be able to train, billions, as we've seen, and
Yeah.
centralize
Mm.
them and kind of provide feedback to individuals appropriately based on the aggregation of our knowledge. So that centralization of AI, or decentralize them. So whether to actually empower individuals to showcase their ultimately their personality, their thoughts, and freedom of choice appropriately going forward. What I think about is not the next 2 years, next 5 years. I really think about like the next 10 to 20 years, what would happen, because a lot can be happening in 20 years, right? 20 years ago, Andrew, I'm sure you remember, like, we didn't have any iPhone, we didn't have any smartphone appropriately. We barely had like dial-up coming, basically waiting for an image to load like a few minutes to just see what's going on the internet. Internet was like a brand new thing, only a couple of years old. But like 20 years fast forward, we are talking about artificial intelligence, a concept that it was in academia for decades, being a reality,
Mm.
right? So in 20 years from now, it's gonna be just 100 times more exponential in terms of the growth of these technologies. So we really need to think about ethical perspective of advancement of these technologies at the same time when we develop them, because we cannot afford appropriately to be able to break the system and say, oopsie, we need to now go back and regulate it appropriately. But at the same time, to be able to deploy an ethical perspective into the development of all of these technologies.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's. I mean, congratulations on getting the opportunity to present to UK Parliament. I mean, that must have been a pretty cool gig.
Yeah, it was certainly the highlight of my professional career, I would say.
No, it's very nice. I mean, did you? What were you most impressed with by that session? Was there anything
Well,
you were most impressed by?
impressed by the audience. I would love to know. I mean, first of all, I was super impressed with the interior of the House of Commons, right? So that was my fascination at the time. I'm not sure if that's
that,
relevant.
that that's that,
Yeah, please.
Sam. That's why I asked the question, because you could be in a very nice place, yeah. But
Yeah.
actually, if the people you were speaking to, were kind of like, what do you say, didn't interact, didn't inquire, didn't really seem engaged, yeah, then that's not impressive, right? So if you can be in a nice place, and then also you get a really engaging audience, and you've done a TEDx talk, right? So you know what I'm talking about here, yeah. Then that's to my mind a double tick, yeah. So I suppose that was why I asked that question in that way.
Yeah. I mean,
What would you say on that?
yeah, we had a very engaging audience, and certainly the discussion was thought provocative, appropriately, on kind of discussing future technologies and their effect on society. But at the same time, that was my first time inside the UK Parliament, and I was so excited that I even sneaked into House of Commons and House of Lords in the gallery to be able to see, what's happening in there. So uh, was fascinating, right? Because I just seen it on TV appropriately, so being there was quite a experience.
Yeah, I mean, they call it the corridors of power. I don't know if that's true or not, but I suppose it is.
Well, I mean,
Is it corridors of power to the people?
one of the
Question mark.
things, yeah, one of the things I discussed, and perhaps few of the MPs there didn't appreciate it much, I imagine, was that if he really fast forward a few decades in the future, right? There's a possibility that we would have appropriately duplicates of ourselves, as AI duplicates. And one of the things I brought up as probably as a initial joke was that in the future we might have a case for direct democracy rather than representative democracy, whereas you kind of like vote for someone to represent your interest. You've got already your interest deployed into a society as a direct democracy. It's not really possible nowadays. It's because we don't have the set technologies. But if you fast forward a few decades in the future, it's possible. And it's
Oh, you don't,
interesting.
you mean you don't need you don't need MPs. You don't need a government. That's what you're basically saying.
Not government. I'm not talking about anarchy per se, but what I'm trying to say is that ultimately, what democracy is,
Well, just not having a government doesn't mean the anarchy, does it? Is that right or not?
to some extent, there is no such thing as self-governing. Ultimately, society, especially on the millions of people, it become anarchy automatically. You can't just have not rule of law and not enforce it appropriately by a government. And so in this case, what I mean by that is that like ultimately when we have representative democracy, it means that we vote for an individual to be able to actually take on our interest
Mm,
as a group and represent our interest
yeah,
in a
correct.
parliament,
As like a proxy,
exactly
Yeah.
as a proxy in Congress, in wherever whatever kind of society we have. Most of the democracies are representative democracies. And in this case, we put our trust in the representative to be able to kind of protect our interest appropriately. In many, many cases across the globe, they don't. Let's be honest. Many cases they don't. I don't say not all of them, but many of them don't. And is it a perfect kind of like way to be able to go forward? Well, at the moment, I don't see a better option. But in the future, there's a possibility of technology goes so advanced that we can actually deploy direct democracy.
I think it'd be cool to do that.
So do I. I think when it comes to deployment, maybe a small country might deploy it in whereas like there are technology advanced, maybe Estonia or somewhere like that. I mean, I was recently in Estonia. I love Estonia. It's such a
Mm,
great country. Lots of entrepreneurs, and
it's nice, isn't it? Yeah, been
they've
there.
got
Yeah.
highest unicorns per capita in the world. I mean, it's amazing. But yeah, somewhere like that might actually create such thing with like technological advancement, given that they already have government on the internet and e-residency and so on. It would
Mm.
be interesting to see if it works.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, I think the positive thing out of the thing you just talked about is that what I sense is that there is a receptiveness by the government to actually open their minds to the potential with technology. Because I think my observation from my history is that there was a lot of closed minds, and they said, no, this is always how we it's like it's been handed down over generation. This is how we've always done it. Why would we want to change? Put those things away. Yeah. But actually, you need to progress. Yeah, you need to the Darwinian principle. Um, and I just felt that my observation over the last couple of decades is that we've been a bit on the back foot. Yeah, we've been not really been embracing it, despite you telling me the positive thing about unicorns and entrepreneurship. But at a policy level, I just think that they've been off the pace. I'm not saying they're on the pace even now, but there's a lot of rhetoric. There's a lot of politicking, a lot of bold statements. But when they tell you the numbers, it's like, okay, we spent we're going to give you 50 pence for this, but actually we're going to put 25 billion into this thing over here, which you think, well, why are we doing that? Yeah. So I don't want this to turn into a political episode, but because they're all the same from my point of view. At London Tech Week, it was like day one it was Rishi, day two it was Kia. It's like it's like I mean I don't. I'll be honest with you. I don't know why they're actually up on stage. It's like guys, if you're gonna do something, then say something and actually do it, rather than actually just be there to be the to play the game. Sorry, but that was my little skeptic kind of like
No, no, no
standing
worries.
on
I
my
mean,
little soapbox
I think
piece.
government by nature is bureaucratic, right? And ultimately, in a bureaucratic environment, responses are slow. And therefore, if you look into kind of like, especially the exponential growth of advanced technologies like AI and quantum and so on, there's so much you can do appropriately in these bureaucratic systems. And don't get me wrong, I think
Yeah.
UK government is doing a very good job in a global sense, right? Specifically when it comes to technology. Always there is a room for improvement. Always, if you're even perfect, there is still room for being more perfect, appropriately. And but yeah, I'm with you on that. When it comes to ultimately government response, and we don't mean I personally don't mean like UK government, but overall governments they don't have the toolkits
Mm.
appropriately to be able to respond fast unless there are, benevolent dictator. That as like the bureaucratic systems are completely taken out and the person can just like on a whim make a decision. I think these like check and balances are a good thing
Oh
in a
yeah, yeah,
society.
yeah. I mean, yeah,
Please,
yeah. I
Andrew.
mean, I think it's generational. I think it's generational. Yeah. So I think that it's about leadership because certain generations, and I'm obviously older than you, right? But I'm technology. I've been in technology for decades, right? So I know it and I understand it and I can see the potential with it. But then, I suppose that's not being me trying to be egotistical, but other people of my age group who haven't been in the technology industry haven't got a Scooby Doo about what the potential with it is, and but then they may have gone down a different career path, and they may be in very senior positions in businesses in government, and they don't realize the potential. Yeah, they just haven't been educated, they haven't been mentored on that. I think it's changing now, but it's been very slow. It's a bit like a wake up call. And I think that the interesting thing I find with conversations now is that it's definitely on the agenda, but also they're scared out of their wits about what it could do to their business, right? Because they realize that either a brand new business could actually disrupt their industry, yeah, and or basically they could miss a competitive position. Yeah, so I think the pace will pick up in the future. But what I have seen is that our experience is that people would you know invest in something that they feel is a shoe in, yeah, rather than taking it's risk management basically. They haven't taken enough risk on the embracement of technology. But then when something like the generative AI stuff comes through, I've seen it's been like the iPhone moment for AI. Yeah, it's like suddenly it's like the pennies dropped. Holy moly! This is like it's like because it's Chat GPT has been like a consumer version of the power of the potential, and you're only scratching the surface. I think that's good because it's actually like shaking people and making them wake up. So
Um,
that's
I
just my
think
my perspective on it.
I
I
think
don't know
it's
if you've
good
got the
and
same
bad to
view.
some extent when it comes to especially policymakers, Andrew, quite frankly. And the reason is because, in my experience, some of the policymakers, individuals, appropriately, not many individuals are experts in these advanced technologies. I mean, they do their best to be able to consult with experts and so on. But when it comes to senior members and so on, they might read a couple of books about AI and are like warmongering kind of like topics on individuals who wrote a book that have absolutely no idea anything about AI, right? And they just liked AI because it's a new big thing, and they wrote a book about it, and now they're selling their books appropriately. I don't know, become bestseller, right? That doesn't mean that they are AI expert in any shape or form, right? If they wrote an AI book that someone else reads and that influences that person because now they think that the AI is a Terminator is coming out to kill us, that's not true. That's just not true. And if you see, for example, Sam Altman, for example, the CEO of OpenAI, coming and say we need regulation,
Mm.
we need our regulation right now because I'm super scared of what's happening. Well, let's be honest. Why we need hard regulation? Because regulation, right? When you regulate a specific environment, if you're already a big player in that environment, you just grow and bigger because you know how to handle regulation. It's because the startups cannot navigate regulation, so the startups doesn't come to with innovation to be able to actually disrupt your business market. So it's a great idea to Sam Altman and et al. That are already leaders in AI to be able to regulate AI because they're already leading it, right? Whereas when it comes to startups, because they cannot regulate, basically navigate the regulation, they're like, oh my goodness, this is amazing to be able to kind of regulate AI and be kind of leaders for the next 30 years. If you are a leader in a specific fast moving environment, such as AI, especially in a late stage, you cannot sleep because you think that some kid in their bedroom is building an algorithm that's much better than you, and tomorrow your company is dead, right? So that's why regulation, we're all talking about regulation, right? It's because of these big players want regulation, so they stop barrier, basically build a big wall that's got barrier to entry for any startups to get into
Mm.
this environment. I'll be honest. This is my take, and I think it's true.
Yeah, that's yeah, I like that. That's very profound. Yeah, it's it's a fun topic. It's a fun topic. So I mean, I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. But what are you most grateful for?
Very good question. I think specifically, I'm a very mission-driven individual, right? I think one of the key aspects for me is that, like, ultimately, I'm pushing my personal mission going forward. I dealt, for example, in my past with depression, so I had to really find out kind of my personal mission, my story, what kind of person I want to be in the future. If you want to kind of like look into regret, ultimately regress in the future, if you fast forward yourself to your 80 or 90 and say, like, was it worth it appropriately? So that kind of like memento mori, stoicism, so, like, remember death appropriately. So yeah, I'm a very mission driven individual. So I think I found my mission in this kind of like Hebrew verb, as of like, say, like tikkun olam, which is like ultimately heal the world, right? Repair the world, right? World is broken, and I think that with technological advancements, we can heal the world appropriately. So what I'm really grateful
Mm,
for is that I'm in a free society as a free individual to be able to actually do what I want to do, right? And I'm grateful for that. Not many people in the world have that, and lots of people across the
mm,
world are losing out, right? We are in a 1% in the world. Let's be honest, Andrew, you and I and many other listeners that are listening
mm.
to this, we are in a 1% of the world,
Yeah, I know.
and we do not care much about the other 99%, right? Because, as you mentioned, we don't experience it and we don't care, we don't see it on television appropriately because these are, like, countries far far away. Who cares? But what
Mm,
if I tell
mm,
you that the next Steve Jobs is not in Silicon Valley, was in Chad, is in Indonesia, is elsewhere, right? But because we
mm,
decided to not
mm.
care, we all lose out because they lose out.
We should I'll be honest with you. We should celebrate that point. I would love that to happen.
So do
I
I.
would love that.
So do I.
So, on the converse of that, then, I suppose, as complementary to that, what are you most excited about?
Great question. What I'm really excited about. I'm really excited to, I'm excited to be alive in this moment of time, right? Because ultimately we
Mm,
can, we are in a multiple crossroads at the same time as a society, right? As a global society right now, right? We can make it left and right. We might go super dystopian, or we might go somewhat utopian, and somewhere in the middle, which is usually the case. Um, yeah, and so I'm excited to see what turns out to be, right. In our lifetime, for the next 20 years, it's going to be a very, very different world we live in right now. But what it would be, is our choice today, and I think that's what makes it exciting.
That's cool. Yeah, maybe actually dystopian one would be good.
I'm not quite sure. I mean, obviously, when we talk about good, it would be good to some people who created it, obviously, but it's probably bad to most of people.
Yeah, exactly. But a bit of structure, there's a bit of structure in your day, rather than this free time. Maybe we'll experience it and we'll like it.
Andrew, are you planning
I'm
to?
thinking back to my reading 1984.
Andrew, are you planning to be Master of Universe or something
Well,
like
no,
that?
no, no. I mean, no, 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 no. So when I was at school, secondary school, we read 1984 as our class assignment by George Orwell.
Mhm.
And so, I know that book intimately. I can recite stuff from the book, and one of my other guests, Joe Toscano. I don't know if you know him. He used to work for Google. I interviewed him when he was in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, and he's a fantastic guy. He wrote the book Automating Humanity, which was released a few years ago, and which is an amazing book about some play out scenarios that could happen. Um, and he the social dilemma book film, yeah, that was put out on Netflix. He was involved in that. He's actually in the film. He's working with all the guys in the US around that kind of lobbying and control from certain organizations, etc. So yeah, I find it's a fascinating topic. So one of the things we do ask as well is, and appreciate your time today, and your all the value you shared and all the experiences you've shared. It's fantastic, and I know it's going to be a good episode, but it has been really good. And I suppose we got lots of people different listening from different backgrounds, and budding entrepreneurs and founders want to learn. That this is the whole premise of this show is, how do we. I didn't have it when I started my journey. So how do I create content with great people to share that out with the world? And so we talk about the pearls of wisdom. So what would be some pearls of wisdom that you would share from the desk of Sam Beni this morning?
I appreciate that. I mean, if it's to entrepreneurs and ultimately individuals who are looking to improve their lives and improve the people's lives surrounding them, really, is three things. I mean, I've founded five companies before, multiple exits, a few really deep tech companies. And one of the things that I really initially thought that it wouldn't play a big part was network, Andrew. Initially I thought, like, you build a great product and it should sell itself, or you work on marketing and it should sell itself appropriately, right? Because you build a great product and people want it. But let's be honest, Andrew, we live in a society that appropriately everyone is connected and interconnected, right? What that means is that you need to have people's
Hmm.
support to be able to push that forward. And what that means is that you need to have a great network. And I learned that after multiple ventures, that network is number one, honestly, is number one success factor to a venture success. Right. And the reason is because you, as a founder and executive teams of a specific startup, could have an amazing network, right? But a really bad product, right? But you can sell that product and scale it and fix it and it'll
Yeah.
become successful. But if you're an amazing product, right? If you have an
Mm.
amazing product, amazing team, but no network, good luck. So to that point,
Mm.
your network, as they say, is your net worth, right? Build it, expand it, maintain it,
Mm.
cherish it. Is important. You cannot have this journey as alone. So you have to build a team. You have to build allies. You need to build relationships to push whatever mission you have forward. So ensure that you push this forward. And second is that you have 24 hours, right? We all have 24 hours in a day, right? And maybe 6, 7, 8 hours of it we sleep. You've got the rest of it to be able to optimize. But that doesn't mean that you need to work all the time on a specific goal. Balance your 24 hours appropriately between different areas of your life, from career to mental health to intellectual health to social relationships and so on, because these are all balancing part of life. And I genuinely believe that balance of all of these areas in your life is happiness, right? And if one goes out of balance, you're unhappy appropriately as an individual. So ensure that you're balancing all of these areas of your life appropriately within the hours that you've got during the day. So you maintain that happiness appropriately going forward, because that appropriate mindset sets everything. Because small decisions lead into big decisions, lead into big outcomes and consequences. So if you cannot have the right mindset and in the right mood appropriately to make those small decisions, those decisions will turn into really bad outcomes ultimately appropriately in the future, right? As an example, if I act angry to someone, I ruin that relationship, that would have a consequence on another decision, and so on and so on. Everything is interconnected. So ensure that you're in a good mental mindset by taking care of your life and self-care. And the third one, quite frankly, the last one, if I had the advice to myself, I've seen it that you asked that question before, would be enjoy the journey, right? We all live in the past and in the future. We always kind of like look into, oh, what mistake I've done and this and that in our head, or like, what should I do tomorrow and this and that. I mean, I usually live in the future. But we forget about to actually the only time we've got is right now, right? And enjoy the journey.
No, those are three great ones. I mean, well, and we're living the third one already. You see, aren't we? By spending time together and recording
Indeed,
this episode
absolutely.
here
It
and
was
now.
it was
It's
absolutely
just me. It's just you and me, and the rest of the world.
indeed.
So and the
The world
rest of
is
the
your
world will know
oyster,
about this
and
episode. In a matter of hours.
indeed, indeed.
Say again, sorry.
I said the world is your oyster, Andrew. Indeed.
So what yeah. I wonder why. I wonder why. I wonder where that came from. Actually, I never looked at where that came from. World is your oyster.
Good question.
I suppose. Oh yeah, I suppose it's because it's pearls, isn't it? Pearls in the oyster. Is that what it is?
Possibly. We'd love to actually search it up.
Yeah, that's a bit of homework for Andrew Turner.
Yeah.
And where is those pearls of wisdom sat in that oyster? But yeah, no. Thank you very much for coming on the show this morning, and it's been a great, a wide discussion. And thanks for being so open about what what the thing that you've been through. Something that I've never had the experience of, and thanks for sharing that and about a bit more about that, because it just shows your resilience and your fortitude to get to where you are and where you what's coming in the future.
I
And I wish
appreciate
you all the best with your latest venture or ventures. And just want to say, yeah, thank you, Sam Beni, who's the CEO of Platin, and that was Andrew Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. And have a great day. See you
it. Thank
soon.
you. Bye bye.